Okay, well, I guess it's time to begin. I hope you had a nice lunch and a chance to meet some new friends possibly and talk mathematics. We had our organization committee meeting, and I would like to say that tentatively New York University, Abu Dhabi, will be the host of UAE Math Day 2016. So this is conditional on them making sure they get the proper approval with their management and everything. And so, but that's what I can announce at this point. So I hope to see you all there for the 14th annual UAE Math Day. And now I'd like to introduce our keynote speaker for this afternoon. Professor Yvonne Madej is a professor in applied mathematics at the University of Pierre and Marie Curie. This morning I mentioned that this is where our physics and math programs come from. So there's a collaboration between Paris Sorbonne, University Abu Dhabi, and the University of Pierre and Marie Curie in Paris to deliver mathematics, science programs in Abu Dhabi. Professor Madej is the director of the Jacques Louis Lyons Laboratory. He is also a visiting professor in the Division of Applied Mathematics at Brown University in the US. He is a member of the European Academy of Sciences and is a section lecturer at the International Congress of Mathematicians in Madrid in 2006. He received the Blaise Pascal Prize and the Jacques Louis Lyons Prize from the French Academy of Sciences in 1991 and 2009, respectively. Professor Madej is the author of 6 books and over 200 papers in numerical analysis, partial differential equations, parallelization, and quantum chemistry. Today, he will speak to us on reduced basis methods for the approximation of the solution to parameter-dependent PDEs and for data assimilation. So without further ado, I would like to introduce Professor Yvonne Madej.
So thank you, Raymond, for this very nice introduction and for this very nice invitation. So I will present you some ongoing work on the use of the concept of reduced basis method and more generally on reduction of complexity. So the idea comes from this picture. Either you want to look for a needle in a haystack, like in this performance, or you want to look at a needle in a needle cushion. So from the mathematical point of view, this will translate into either looking for the approximation of a function in some Banach space, so some general Banach space, e.g. like L2, H1, L infinity, of some regular enough functions, and this will lead to the classical method of approximation, like the finite element method, or the spectral method for approximation of PDEs, where in spectral method, you try to approximate your function by classical truncated Fourier series, or by algebraic polynomials, and in finite element method you try to approximate them piecewise by low order polynomials. And you have many pieces. When I say piecewise polynomial approximation, there are a lot of pieces. If you look at the needle cushion, then you will look for the approximation of the function in a certain manifold. And you will consider this manifold denoted as S as being well behaved. And this will allow to do reduction of complexity. So how do you measure the reduction of complexity? The right tool will be known by the Kolmogorov width. So let's go to the definition. Let us assume that we have a norm. So X is a norm linear space. We have our manifold of solution, S, and we have a finite dimensional space of dimension n that is denoted by xn, and that for the moment is a generic one. we'll try to find the best one. The best one in order to do the approximation of S by xn. So how do you measure the distance between S and xn? What you try to do is to look at the distance between an element u of S and an element Vn of xn, and you try to minimize this distance between u and any element Vn in the finite dimensional space xn, and you try to maximize it in order to see if every element in S is well or not approximated by xn. So this is the deviation of the set S with respect to the space xn. Then the Kolmogorov n-width will allow you to find the best xn, as I said you. So it is dn of S and x, which is the minimum over every choice xn. The only requirement is that xn is of dimension n, okay? Of this deviation, which is the sup over u, the infimum over Vn of u minus Vn. Okay, so this allows you to measure, in some sense, to which extent the set, the manifold S, can be approximated by a particularly well-chosen n-dimensional subspace of X denoted by xn star. Xn star will be the best one, and if this notion exists, if you know that the Kolmogorov n-width is small, then you have a chance to do a reduction of complexity, because you will know that your manifold S can be approximated by a small dimensional space xn, and this will be your needle cushion. So therefore, the asymptotic behavior of this n-width is important to understand. The problem is that the best one, the optimal one, xn star, is not known. So, haystack or cushion? We are interested in the many applications I will show you in trying to approximate some manifold that is built of some functions that depend on a parameter, okay? So this is the reason why this is a manifold. It is parameterized by the parameter mu in D, and we have solutions. These can be solutions of the Navier-Stokes equations, or some elasticity problem, for instance, or more complicated problem, like in quantum chemistry, where you want to solve the many-body problem, and you have a nonlinear, very nonlinear eigenvalue problem to solve. So we further assume that this manifold has a small Kolmogorov n-width in order to be able to work in the cushion. So why should this set have a small Kolmogorov n-width? You can first speak with the people that know the field. This can be people from industry, that can be people in mechanical department, in physical department, or in chemical department. So they have the intuition that their function looks quite similar. You can also do a verification, which is that you try to scan the manifold and check that actually it has a small Kolmogorov n-width, or you can try to do some mathematical analysis so that a priori, before computing the solution, before scanning your manifold, you know that the set of solution will be of small Kolmogorov n-width. So until recently, there was very few analysis on this matter, and this is a paper I did with Tony Patera at MIT and Gabriel Turinich in Paris, proving that there is a priori some convergence and some reason why the manifold for some partial differential equation should be small. And there is this very nice recent paper that is not published right now, it's just like a preprint by Albert Cohen and Ron DeVore, that has been working on the Kolmogorov width under holomorphic mapping. So I will try to give you some hints about what this mathematical analysis is speaking about. So the idea is that assume that you have a set of parameters, for instance, that is a compact set with a small Kolmogorov width, and then you have a map L that will transform every parameter in something which through a linear mapping. So in this case, when the simple fact that L is a bounded linear operator, then naturally the Kolmogorov n width of the image of the range of L of D will be the dimension of D multiplied by the norm of L. Okay, so this is very easy to understand, and this is the basic of the problem. Now, the more involved statement that Cohen and Devore were able to do is to look at how does the simple fact can be generalized. And in the case where L is not a bounded linear operator, but now is an holomorphic mapping between two Banach spaces X and Y, then if the n width of the set of parameters scales like O of n to the minus r, saying that n being the dimension and of the X space, Xn space that do the approximation, then the distance between elements of D and element of the finite dimensional space will go to 0 like n to the minus r. Then, if L is an holomorphic mapping, the Kolmogorov n width of L of D scales like O of n to the minus s, with s very close to r, because s is about r to minus 1. So, for instance, if you use this as D being a parameter in a partial differential equation, and U is the solution to your parameter-dependent partial differential equation, then S of mu has a small dimension, which is already a very nice feature, because a lot in the application, a lot of partial differential equation depend on a parameter. So, but this is also the case if you take, then you know S as a small Kolmogorov n width, you take the cube of this function, or the exponential of this function, then these also, this set, these manifolds, will also have a small Kolmogorov n width. And this will be useful in order to approximate nonlinear partial differential equation. So, now how do you know these functions U? There are different ways. Either you know them explicitly somehow by some values of U at some particular points in the domain of definition, or you know them by some outputs, which is when you are measuring a real device, generally you don't know the pointwise values of the solution you are considering. For instance, if you measure the temperature in a room, then it's not a pointwise values, because the device that is measuring, that is taking the measure, has some volume, some size. So this is the output I am speaking about, because there is a device that is measuring the function you are considering. Or U can be known implicitly because it satisfies some parameter-dependent partial differential equation. Or it can be a mix of the above, because you have some experiments, you know some model, and you want to combine the thing in order to know better the solution. Okay? So if we assume that the first item here, we know U by some values at some particular points, is available, then this is interpolation. So, if people have done some math before coming to this talk, they know that they are on something that is well known. Interpolation of function is something very trivial. Actually, what you are trying to do is to have a set of interpolating functions. So, for instance, if you want to do polynomial interpolation, you will have some polynomial, 1, x, x2, etc. So I am trying to do some generalization of interpolation here, where I am considering that my interpolating function are a priori given, and they are, of course, linearly independent. And then I have my solution U that I know at some point, and what I want to do is to do an approximation of U like the sum of alpha times phi n. So I am trying to approximate U by a linear combination of these m functions, say, from n equal 1 to capital M, by imposing an exact equality at some zeta m points zeta m from m equal 1 to capital M. Generally, you want the same number of points as number of coefficients you have to define. And this will be the interpolation in the space Xm spanned by the function phi1, phi2 up to phi capital M. Okay, so very simple problem that you can actually try to modify a little bit by saying that if you want to do this for every m, then maybe the point will depend on capital M. So if you want to do an interpolation on 3 points, you will have a certain set of points, and if you want to do an interpolation on 10 points, then this will be 10 different points. And you know this is true even for very simple polynomial approximation, because you know that if you try to do interpolation on equidistant point, this is a very bad idea because there is a Lebesgue constant that is going to infinity. Okay, so among the classical questions that are raised by the standard interpolation technique, which is a very simple way to do an approximation, and I repeat again, when it is the case of polynomial interpolation, the question is, given a set of points, does the interpolant at this point exist? Is the interpolant unique? How does the interpolation compares with other type of approximation? Because generally what you want to get is the best fit. For polynomial approximation, what you would like to do is the best polynomial approximation. But this is a too difficult problem, so you go backward and you do interpolation because generally you are not able to do an orthogonal projection in real life. But if you remember well what was taught to you about polynomial interpolation, you know that taking, as I said, equidistant point is not the best one. So in the general context of general interpolation, where I will do an approximation not by polynomial, but a set of functions that are just linearly independent, that can be anything, is there an optimal selection for the points? And is there a constructive optimal selection for the interpolation points? Because I am an applied mathematician, so there can be a theorem here saying, yes, there exists an optimal selection of points. But if you cannot detect what are these optimal interpolation points, it's not very useful. We want a constructive way to do the best interpolation process. Okay, so you know that these questions are covered in the polynomial case, but it is not so easy. And this is well known in 1D, but if I provide you a general shape of a function, can you do the polynomial approximation on a lunar system, for instance, on a star domain? Is it possible to do interpolation on a star? Do you know what are the points you should use in 2D on a star? I guess not. To have something that is at most stable. You know in 1D that there is an optimal selection of points. The Lebesgue constant scales like a constant time log, but you don't know what is this optimal set of points. But you know that there is a constructive quasi-optimal set, which are the Chebyshev points, okay? The cosine of equidistant points. So you know that even in the polynomial case, there is a difference between these two questions that are raised here. In 1D, in 2D, almost nothing is known, in 3D either. And when I want to do approximation in a large dimension with functions that are not polynomial, of course, the questions are completely open. So what I want to do here is try to interpolate with functions phi n that are linearly independent, but I want them to coincide with some particular functions that will be computed on the side and that are in my set of solutions, in my manifold. I want to approximate my manifold by some linear combination of particularly well-chosen elements on the manifold, which seems quite natural, but is at the opposite of trying to do a polynomial approximation. Okay, so we have been able to prove that this interpolation process that I will explain you later is indeed a good way in order to approximate almost optimally the solution, almost optimally in the sense that up to the Lebesgue constant, the dimension, the error provided by this interpolation that I will tell you more about is almost as good as the Kolmogorov n-width. Okay, so what do we want to do? We have a function phi. We know it at some point, zeta 1, zeta 2, zeta m minus 1. And we assume that we have built this coefficient alpha that depends on capital phi, so that I have an equality here between the function phi and its interpolant. Its interpolant being in the linear space spanned by the function phi1, phi2, up to phi m minus 1. So how will I choose the next function phi m, because here I only know phi up to m minus 1. So what I do here is to involve the error in L infinity between the function phi and the interpolant, and a priori I am expecting that this will go to 0 rapidly. So what I do is to define the parameter mu m that correspond to the solution that is the less well approximated by the interpolation process here. Because I am, for a phi being a solution on the manifold, I am trying to find the solution on the manifold that is the less well approximated by the interpolation process at this level m minus 1. So it is a greedy method where I defined the next function as being the one that is the less well approximated by my interpolation process. One by one, I select the one that provides the more information. And now the next interpolation points, because in order to determine this interpolant, I only add the interpolating points from 1 to m minus 1. The next one, the zeta m, will be the place where the error is the maximum between this function, that is my next function, and its interpolant at level m minus 1. So one by one, again, I select on the manifold the function that brings the more information in order my interpolation process is getting better and better. Okay? So what can be done is to provide an a posteriori estimator, because if I do the interpolation at level m and I continue nevertheless the operation, the next point will give me an a posteriori estimator, which is pretty good, and this I will show you here, where my set of functions is analytic and is 1 divided by square root of x1 minus mu1, mu1 is the first parameter, plus x2 minus mu2, where mu2 is the second parameter. So you see my function is defined on two variables x1 and x2 and depends on two parameters mu1 and mu2. And now the mu parameter is in a square, minus 1 close to 0 to the square, and the x is also in a square. And you see that when x is close to 0 and mu is close to 0, then this 1 divided by something which is almost 0 will go to infinity. So this is a pretty bad functions that depends on the parameter mu1 and mu2. And what I am trying to do here is trying to do an approximation for any value of mu of u of x and mu by a particularly well-chosen set of functions u for mu1, mu2 up to mu m. And this is the error I get for m equal to 8, only 8 function in 2D, I get an error of 10 minus 2. If I take 16 function, I get an error of 10 minus 3. If I take 32 function, an error of 10 minus 5. So you see that the convergence is very rapid, even though these functions are not very nice. And with polynomial in 2D approximation, I wouldn't get this kind of decrease to 0. Here I have plotted the Lebesgue constant, which is the gap between the best fit and the interpolation efficiency. And you see that the Lebesgue constant, like in the polynomial approximation, it has to go to infinity to increase, but you see that the increase is pretty slow like a logarithm or maybe a linear increase with respect to the number of degrees of freedom. Okay? So these are the points that are selected in the domain omega for x, and these are the parameters that are selected in order to do the approximation. Okay, an application where I am working with this with Électricité de France, with these three people, and we are trying to monitor a reactor, a nuclear reactor. So the idea is that nuclear reactor is a complex technology, of course. For a poor mathematician like me, it's unbelievable what they can do. But nevertheless, I can try to propose some method because when the reactor is working, you don't want to go into the core because it's composed of uranium fuel, and you have no way to measure inside the core, and nevertheless you want to monitor it. Okay? So outside of the core you have some place because you have a reflector which slows down the neutrons and reflect inside the core and protects the core vessel. So we want to understand the behavior of the core from data measured continuously during time. So this is the complexity of the core, and this is the simplification for the moment of the model. We are just trying to find ways in order to reconstruct the solution to this model, 1D model of the neutron diffusion equations. So these are, so it is a two-group diffusion equation. So you have phi1 and phi2. This is a two-group. And you have many coefficients here that are not so easy to measure and to understand. And the knowledge of this coefficient is important in order to understand the behavior of the core. So this is the solution phi1. This is the solution phi2, okay, here, for a particular set of parameters. But if you vary the parameter in solving this one-dimensional problem, you see that there is some difference between the phi1, the phi2, and the energy. And this is, again, the energy, the way it varies. So what you can say that it's not a unique solution. What you can say also that there seems to be persistence of a shape either in the energy or in the flux, in the phi1 and phi2. They look a little bit similar. They look a little bit similar. This means that the manifold may have a small Kolmogorov N-width. If you want to do an approximation with polynomials of this, it will be very hard. But if you want to do approximation of this function by selecting some of these, it will be more easy. And this is what is proven here, where we illustrate the N-width by doing a SVD, which is, I have no time to explain this in detail, but the singular value decomposition computed on the manifold show you with, after 6 functions, you know almost everything about the complete manifold, both in the L2 and the H1 norm. And now, if you want to do interpolation, let's try to do interpolation between 0 and 30, which is the global interval where these functions do live. This is between 0 and 30. And here you see there is a discontinuity in the solution, and the power does not exist here because this is outside the core and this is inside the core. So right now we want to see how the interpolation through these on this manifold is working. So I first try to locate points. This is the first point, which is outside the core. The second point is inside the core. The third point is here, outside the core, but the fourth, the fifth, the sixth are inside the core. So if I allow myself to take measures inside the core, then through interpolation of function on my manifold by some functions on the manifold, and with 6 functions you see that I have a plateau, I get a 10 minus 5 error with only 5 or 6 functions by interpolation. This is not the best fit, and this is valid for either the function 1, the function phi2, or the power. Everything does behave well if I use my points, if I allow myself to take many measurements of my flux and my energy inside the core. But now this is not possible. So I want to propose a method that will put my points only outside the core, because this is the only place where I can do measurement. And so if you have well followed, I need to understand what is inside by taking measurement outside. So this is extrapolation, okay? This is a conducted extrapolation with, by choosing the points only outside the core, and you see that, of course, there is a little instability here that is arriving, but for the accuracy I want to go with 5, 6, or 7 function, I am able to get the same accuracy, 10 minus 5, as if I would have put all my points inside and I would have done really interpolation. This is again extrapolation, and this is a stable extrapolation because I am using function on the manifold and I am not using polynomial extrapolation that would be a complete disaster. Okay? So now let's assume that we don't know pointwise values of my solution, but averages of u on some particular, maybe small parts of the domain. When I put a thermometer here and here, they will measure the temperature around the point where they are located. Okay? So in order to tell what is the output computed out of u, I propose to model this by being an integral on a small domain of the function u I want to measure times a regular function chi, which has a support in omega. For instance, this can be a Gaussian function, for instance, or a function that is 1 inside small omega and 0 outside. So is it possible to do the same type of interpolation with these measures of omega that are not pointwise values? Actually, yes, because if you think a little, the interpolation is exactly such an integral with a delta function. So what I will do is to generalize the interpolation here by a function chi that I did for a delta function, a Dirac function, for any function. And then I will need less regularity on u, and this gives rise to the generalized empirical interpolation method, where, again, in a greedy way, I add the function on the manifold that will allow me to do interpolation, and I add the points that are the best suited in order to represent well the error. And this has been used for some approximation of a fluid flow. You know that a fluid flow is represented by the knowledge of the velocity and the pressure. And for instance, if you have an incompressible viscous flow, the equations are the Navier-Stokes equations that solve the velocity and the pressure. So the idea is that in cases you have some parameter in Navier-Stokes, for instance, the Reynolds number, the Rayleigh number, if you have some temperature, or you can also vary the shape of the domain where you are computing your solution. Then you have a vectorial data, which is the velocity, which itself is a vector, and the pressure, which is a scalar function. So when things are going well, and things are going well because Albert Cohen and Ron DeVore told us that the solution of the Navier-Stokes, when the parameters vary nicely, do build a manifold with a small Kolmogorov n-width, we are able to approximate u by some snapshots through the measurements on the output. And what is important here is that if you measure the pressure, for instance, you are able to reconstruct the velocity, or you can also, by some knowledge on the velocity, you can reconstruct the pressure. And this is important, for instance, for application in the blood flow, because measuring the pressure is quite complex. Measuring the velocity from outside measurement is possible. So if we are able to reconstruct the pressure from measurement on the velocity, this is very nice. And this is what we prove here. We prove that the error, depending on knowing everything on the velocity and the pressure, or knowing things on the velocity alone and reconstructing the pressure, or knowing things only on the pressure and reconstructing the velocity, is possible and goes to zero at the same speed with very few degrees of freedom, because I get here again a 10 minus 5 error with 25 degrees of freedom. This is for a two-dimensional Navier-Stokes equation. Now, let's go to another way, an implicit way that we know the manifold, the set of solution U of mu, and this is because we know a parameter-dependent partial differential equation. Okay, so we will use here the concept of reduction of complexity, and it has a name of the method. It is the reduced basis method. So the idea is again to build from a greedy procedure the space Xn, which is not the best one, but is almost as good as the best one, and this is proven in this preliminary paper by Buffa, myself, Tony Patera, Christophe Prudhomme, and Gabriel Turinich, and was proven also by Binev, Cohen, Damen, Dever, Petrovra, and Wojciech. And more recently, in 2013, by Dever, Petrovra, and Wojciech, where they were able to prove the optimality of the greedy construction. Actually, if you look, when you do an approximation of a partial differential equation, you get matrices to invert. The matrices here have the size n by n because the space Xn is of dimension n. And n, as you saw before, for instance here, you see n is 25, 30. So with so very few degrees of freedom, then you can invert the matrix almost exactly by hand, if you have some time. But a matrix 25 by 25 is inverted very rapidly. So you know that the computation scales like O to n to the cube, but n is very, very small, which means that you can do this computation of a full Navier-Stokes problem in almost real time on a laptop or even on your cellular phone. Okay, so this is, for instance, a work done by Yan Lai Chen, Yann Estaven, and José Rodriguez and Xiwan Su, where we were looking at the solution of a wave problem, solving the Maxwell equation. So the coefficient that, the parameter that determines the problem are the shape of the domain. These are two different experiments. This is the shape of the domain. This is another shape of the domain. The parameter can be here the angle of this opening, the angle of the incident wave, the angle of the outside wave, and the frequency also. So these are different parameters that enter in the equation, and the equation is here, where you have the parameter for the geometry, you have the incident wave, and you have the omega, that is a parameter. These are different solutions to show you that A, they are different, B, they are not so different, which means that from an expert point of view, you may think that the manifold of all these solutions will be of small Kolmogorov n-width. And this is what is represented here, where we do the approximation with a reduced basis technique, depending on the size of the parameter. Here are where the parameters are taken, and you see that you have a very rapid decay of the error, which is about the same as what I showed you before. And now this can allow you to build an inverse problem or try to optimize the angle of opening here. These are different response depending on the size of the opening here. So you see, for instance, here that the response here, the solution here, looks completely different than here, and these are two different angles. And you can be interested, I will not tell you what are the real objective, which is not really to recognize fishes in the sea. You are interested in having a very low response in the direction of the incident wave. And you see that if you plot the solution here, what you get here is a minimum, which is less than minus 10 dB. And this plot has been computed from a linear combination of the solution computed at the position of these red points that represent different size of angle. And you see that the minimum here is very well captured and correspond to really a minimum of the solution. And you can see here that there is in this value 14.3, which is on the complete left, there is almost no response in the direction of the incident wave that is hitting this object from the right to the left. Here you have an answer. Here, of course, you have a very important answer. And here you have minimized the answer in the direction of the incident wave. Okay, so this is an extension in 2D of the problem with two types of parameters. Now, if I have a mix of everything, saying that I know the model, I know some measurements, what can I do? I can do then some data assimilation that we name with Tony Patera, Penn, and Yano. We named it the Parameterized Background Data Weak Framework in order to reconstruct a solution from a model and from measurement. The problem generally with the model is that it is a partial differential equation. You can solve it, maybe you can take some time to prepare your framework, and you can decide that this month I will do all the preparation by using the partial differential equation that I have, so that in 2 months I will be ready in order to do the data analysis of my system, and to do it very rapidly and in real time. So in this kind of reduction of complexity, generally you have 2 stages. One in which you do heavy computation by solving the partial differential equation, where you prepare to be very rapid. On the second stage, where you want to solve your problem like this in real time. So the other problem with the model is that it is a model. It is not the truth. You generally don't know you are not God, and you don't know the exact equation. You just have an approximation, and you have an error between your model and the truth. Actually, the modeling is a science where you try to get rid about unimportant or things that are assumed to be not so important, and to have to provide a mathematical equation in order to represent your framework. So assume now that you have many data, many measurements. So you are in the frame of the data assimilation. So you have many measurements, maybe you have noise, and you know a parameter-dependent model, a partial differential equation, but as I told you, you don't know the exact truth, so it is somehow biased. So now the idea in this mix of everything and in the context of small Kolmogorov n width, you can build an approximation of the exact solution by combining the knowledge of the solution of your biased parameter-dependent model, which represent fairly well, but not exactly the solution you are looking at, and the exact measurement that themselves are maybe polluted with a little bit of noise. So how from these 2 incorrect measurements can you do something, and can you do something better than only one of these? This is the real device you have here a loudspeaker, you have here a box in which the loudspeaker is sending some frequencies. You have here that can move in different direction a microphone in order to reconstruct the solution of your problem. And the model is done on this computational domain and is a Maxwell equation, where the domain of computation is bigger, of course, than this little box here that appears in green, and that represents the outside of the box, because you don't want to know, you don't want to measure what are the boundary conditions on the box itself. So this is a comparison between the true solution and the model. So here you have the true solution, and here you have the model. So you see that the model is pretty good in some sense, but is pretty bad in some particular values here. Now you have the measurement, and the measurement at the point. And from the measurement, you are able to reconstruct more precisely the solution. In these different plots, you see that it's much better. And here, the solution of the model is completely off. So, by combining the knowledge of the model and the knowledge of some values, even with noise, you are able to indeed, in this frame, reconstruct more precisely the solution. And again, this is in O of N3 computation, even for nonlinear problem. So, I write here, you barely realize what reduced order model can do for you, because in a preliminary stage, this was much more expensive. You have to compute with a finite element method, with a spectral method, each one of these capital N functions. But capital N is not so big. Capital N represents the size of the Kolmogorov N width that I introduced in the preliminary stage. And N is what, 10, maybe in complex problem 100. The finite element solution is with a number of degrees of freedom of 1 million, 10 millions. Okay? And these are matricial system of dimension 1 million over 1 million. What I show you here is matrices that are 10 by 10, 100 by 100, and that's it. So you can do this computation really in real time, even for nonlinear problem, and this really allows you to improve a lot the representation of your function. Of course, if you are in a frame of small Kolmogorov N width. Okay? So I have not covered many things because time is flying. I have not presented the link between what I showed you and the tensor product representation, in particular the Tucker format, which is really useful in the application. I have not presented you the black box implementation in order that indeed the computation are done in O of N3 computation, even for nonlinear problem. This is not so obvious, and actually it uses the first part of the talk, which was an interpolation, even when you want to solve partial differential equation. I have not presented you either the non-invasive reduced basis technique, where you don't need to know the model, you just need to have a solver, an industrial solver, that is working on different meshes, and from which you learn and you are able to extract information and be very rapid in order to compute the solution using a solver and a model that you don't really know. This leads also to rectification. This is a mathematical device where we improve the notion of interpolation. I have not presented you time-dependent problem, but there is an extension to time-dependent problem. I have not presented you about more complicated problem which do not come from the nonlinearity but come from the non-coerciveness of the problem, which is about the same as time-dependent problem. And I have not presented you the application of the reduction of complexity in order to do high-performance computing, where it is important because now we are speaking of 1 million computers working together, so you need to exchange information between these 1 million of computers that will soon be available. So you need in you are obliged to diminish the size of the messages that you want to transfer between the computer. And this method of reduction of complexity can be used either to diminish the size of the message that you want to transfer from one node to the other, or also to diminish the size of the storage of all this computation that you are doing now in exascale computation. Okay, so this work has been done mainly in collaboration with my colleague and friend Tony Patera at MIT, and this is a list of people in Italy, in US, in Norway, in France, in Spain, that are working with me, with us, in order to do this type of approximation. I thank you, and if you have any question, I will be glad to answer them.
A very quick question. You mentioned at the end that there are several things that you don't have time to talk about. But can you tell us a bit about the time-dependent problem? What are the main challenges when you move to the time-dependent problem?
Okay. So for time-dependent problem, the point is that you can use a different method. So the idea of the greedy method is that you try to scan the manifold you are working on, but you don't want to compute each of the solution, because each of the solution involve simulation by a finite element method, and this is very expensive. This may take 1 day, 1 week, okay? So if you want to get a hand on the manifold, and you have 1 month, and you don't have many years, you don't want to compute 100 solution on your manifold. So you have to invent a way to detect what are the most important parameters on the manifold. So you will, by some way, which is an a posteriori error analysis based on the reduced basis method, and we can discuss this later, you detect what are the most important points. mu1 is the most important, so I will refer to my finite element method. mu2 is the most important, I will refer to my finite element method. mu3, mu5, mu10, and for these 10 values, and only for these 10 values, I will do the finite element representation. Okay. For the time representation, you could do the same. I will evaluate at time t equal to 1 second, because at the beginning there is really something which is happening, and then 10 minutes, then 1 hour. But the point is that for a time-dependent problem, in order to know the solution after 1 hour, you need to know the solution at every time step. So it's different from the manifold. The time can be represented in some way like a parameter, but you are forced to compute the solution for every values of this parameter. So for time-dependent problem, what you do generally is you have time and you have one parameter, mu, that can be multidimensional. So you select mu1 and you compute the whole evolution. Okay? And now, from this complete evolution, you will select a few time snapshots in time for this value mu1 in order to approximate the first representation of your manifold. So in the time representation, what you can do, because you have all the snapshots and you want to extract the fundamental representative solution, what you will do is a POD, proper orthogonal decomposition, or a SVD, singular value decomposition. If you would have done this in the parameter, you would have been obliged to compute 1,000 solutions and do the SVD. Okay? So at the root of the method, it's different because you select one mu1 and you compute all the evolution and you select some snapshots. Then you want to have a better representation. So you detect from an a posteriori analysis the second parameter, mu2, and you compute the whole evolution of it, because this is the way it has to be done. Because time, you need to compute all the solution in order to know the solution at the end of your simulation, etc. So this is one difference between the parameter that are the constitutive parameter of the equation, and the time. The second one is that then what you can think is that you have two ways to consider a time-dependent problem. Either it is an evolution of a steady phenomena, of an elliptic equation or an hyperbolic equation, but it is an evolution, and you will do the same, meaning that your reduced basis technique will involve solution in space only that you will try to evolve by an Euler scheme or a more involved scheme in time. Or you can consider that your manifold is a set of time and space functions where you will do an approximation of u at time t and point x like a linear combination of coefficients that now do not depend on time of reduced basis of size of x and t. Okay? So this is a major difference between these two conceptions, and in some cases it's better to go in one direction or better to go in another direction.